Hello and welcome everyone. Happy Women's History Month. My name is Kelly Finn-Stormer and I'm the Executive Director of the Combined Arms Institute. And as part of the Combined Arms team, it is our privilege to welcome you all with us today. We wanted to address this up front. We are here for a panel of multi-generational women veterans to talk about what it's like having lived their lives as an invisible veteran and hear from their authentic experiences of service. So thank you for joining us today. And we will enjoy and invite our panel to join us in just a second. We wanted to talk as we had a lot of pre-submitted questions about supportive services for women veterans, and that is exactly what Combined Arms and our network of amazing partners does. So if you need help or support getting access to a career, registering for your VA benefits, looking for mental health services, we are absolutely here for you to connect you to the service providers, and we'll make sure that they will be accountable to following up with you. This is exactly what we do, and we're here to accelerate your transitions in all throughout life. And so it's our privilege to host you with us today. We had an amazing kickoff to Black History Month through the Voices of Black Veterans panel. And so we're thrilled to be able to do this again with our amazing partners and panelists. You all are in for a treat. As you can see, the chat is blowing up, and welcome to everyone. Please tell us where you're from. We're excited to hear from you and when you've served. We want you to join in this conversation. We'd like to say a special thank you to our partners at Enbridge for sponsoring and presenting this event for all of us, and for our amazing partners at Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, the Foundation for Women Warriors, Minority Veterans of America, and the Mission Continues. Together, we are working to provide opportunities for women veterans through both advocacy, outreach, and programming. And we'll talk a little bit more about how you can get involved with each of these organizations at the end. But we want to just make sure that we dive into this panel. Again, our Enbridge is our amazing partner. Their core values are about safety, integrity, respect, and inclusion. And that is exactly what we are here to do today, to honor and celebrate our women veterans. As a women veteran, I'm just thrilled and honored and privileged to be able to host and convene this amazing panel. I will point out, I am the only Navy veteran in this group. That was unintentional, but we have amazing panelists with us today. Our moderator, Dr. Qwynn Galloway-Salazar, is the founder of In Their Honor LLC and co-principal investigator at the Brooklyn College Veterans History Project. She's a veteran of the United States Army and a spouse to a combat veteran. She is amazingly passionate about conducting oral history interviews of veterans, listening to how veterans make their meaning of their experiences and sharing them with larger audiences. She is absolutely the perfect person to moderate this panel, and we are thrilled to have her with us today. You can see her amazing academic accomplishments, and we're just, congratulations, Doctor. We are thrilled to have you with us. Thank you for joining us. Trailblazers is what we talk about for the rest of our panelists, and we're just so thrilled. We have Joan Furey with us today. Joan is a graduate of Pilgrim State Hospital School of Nursing in the class of 1967, a Vietnam veteran, was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Army Nurse Corps in June 1968. She volunteered for duty in Vietnam and served as a staff nurse in the post-op ICU of the 71st Evacuation Hospital from January 1969 to January 1970, where she was awarded the Bronze Star for meritorious service. Honorably discharged in June of 1970, she continued her studies at Stony Brook University and got a master's degree in nursing from NYU. We are just thrilled to have her. She was employed by the Department of Veterans Affairs for close to 30 years, has been author and co-author of numerous articles regarding veterans' health issues, PTSD and women veterans expert. You do not want to miss her story and background, and thank you for being with us, Joan. She's the recipient of numerous awards and commendations in recognition of her service to America's veterans, and received the Secretary of Veterans Affairs Exceptional Service Award in 2000. Our next panelist is Elizabeth Estabrooks. Liz is currently serving as the Deputy Director of the Center for Women Veterans at the Department of Veterans Affairs. She is a Cold War peacetime Army veteran who served at Harvey Barracks in Kitzingen, Germany from 1978 to 1980. She continues to advocate for women veterans both inside and outside of the VA to recognize their service and contributions of women veterans. Coming from the great state of Ohio, she's done a tremendous amount of work through her career around intimate partner violence, military sexual assault, community safety, gender, culturally responsive services, and inclusion. Also a very professionally accomplished woman from Oregon with a Master's of Social Work from Columbia University. We are thrilled to have her as one of our panelists. Our next panelist is Layla Ireland. Layla is a retired Army veteran who served for 12 years in the United States Army, 2 combat tours in Iraq, and retired in November of 2015. On June 4th, 2015, Layla and her husband, Tech Sergeant Logan Ireland, courageously came out as transgender service members by sharing their story on the New York Times short film, Transgender at War and Love. She's also been featured in the length documentary Transmilitary, which chronicles the lives of Layla, Logan, and 2 other fellow service members defending their country's freedom while fighting for their own. And Layla currently serves as the chair for Minority Veterans of America, and we are just thrilled to have her experience with us today as well. And then finally, but certainly last but not least, we have with us Melissa Bryant. Melissa was appointed on March 15th, 2021, almost a year ago, as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs at the Office of Public and Intergovernmental Affairs at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Prior to that, she was the National Legislative Director for the American Legion, and certainly served with Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. She's a former Army captain and Operation Iraqi Freedom combat veteran. She's widely recognized for championing causes impacting women and minority service members and highlighting the distinct challenges this growing population faces while advocating for smart policy and legislative solutions. She's a native of Philadelphia, my hometown, so we're thrilled to have her along with us. 3rd generation combat veteran, has a BA in political science from Hampton University, an alumna of Howard University School of Law, and holds an MA in policy management from the McCourt School of Public Policy at Georgetown University. So ladies, if you will, please join me online if you'd like to turn on your videos, turn on your microphones. We'd love to see your beautiful faces. Thank you for joining us. And I'm gonna turn it over to Qwynn in just a minute to dive into this amazing panel of your experiences. But before we do, we want to take a moment to acknowledge this amazing moment in history that we have this chance to really take a bridge so appropriately from Black History Month into Women's History Month as we celebrate the 688th Central Postal Directory Battalion. For those of you that are not aware, yesterday, and that's right, let's give them applause. Yesterday in the House, we passed we had an act of Congress passed to award the Congressional Gold Medal to these amazing women. And we just celebrate you, we honor you, and we are so grateful for your contributions today. So thank you to all of you for joining us. And let's, again, give it up for our 688. We just look into their story if you don't know, but these women served during World War II, sorting the mail, did it in half the time projected, came home, faced racism, sexism, and have just been amazing at the work that they have been doing. And we are finally honoring them in the way that they deserve to be celebrated. So it's a privilege to share with you. So Qwynn, I'm going to turn it over to you to kick off our panel. Again, thank you ladies for being with us today.
Oh, Kelly, thank you so much. The first thing I do want to acknowledge, I know there's been conversation in the chat regarding the blocking of the bios and also the blocking of the collaborators at the bottom. So maybe we can ensure a way that we can put the links to the bios in the chat, or Once the recording is ready, we can add the bios so that everyone can see the bios and its accuracy. So I do want to acknowledge the fact that I have seen in the chat the conversations about the blockage. It's technology, everyone. We're working within what we have, but I am so thankful to be here with you all today. And I want to kick this off to kind of bring everyone into the moment and into the space. Stories matter. Stories matter. And as we kick off Women Histories Month, it's important to know that people want to hear and need to hear the stories of our women veterans and women who have served. Looking at the numbers of today's attendees tells us that. It tells us that our stories matter. Keeping our stories buried creates holes in the tapestry of history, of her story, of our collective story. Missing out on the narrative also has an impact on history. So let's write the history. Write as in R-I-G-H-T. Let's write our history. So today we have the pleasure of introducing these 4 amazing women veteran trailblazers that is going to join me at this virtual dining room table. I want everyone to envision sitting at a table with us and just getting just the breadth and the wisdom and the experiences and the stories that these women are going to share. It's multi-generational sisters of arms, sharing their lived experiences, their lessons learned, and meaning making and collective wisdom. So will you all journey with us as we embrace this next hour or so of a conversation that is going to change the way that our society as a whole sees women veterans. So to kick us off, just thinking about the generations, we're going to start, Joan, just no pressure, but all the pressure in the world. We're going to start off with you. And what I would love for you to do to kick us off is to share with us a bit about your service and how did you come to serve? And ultimately, this is the same question I'm going to ask all 4 of you all is, how did you come to serve?
Well, thank you, Qwynn. Well, actually, when you talk about it from a historical perspective, I guess it's appropriate to start off with me, because I'm not sure how many on this in the audience can take themselves back to what it was like to grow up in the United States in the 1950s as children of World War II veterans. Like most of the people from my generation, my father was a World War II combat veteran. And we grew up in Brooklyn, which I like to say was a small town back in the 1950s. And everybody you knew, their father, their uncle, their whatever, had served in World War II. And there was a certain aura about, I don't know, about their service. So I kind of grew up with that, but never had any awareness, I have to say, as a young person, about women. I always thought of it as men. And then when, and I always remember this very clearly, when I was about 10, we were watching one of the movies about World War II, and it was a movie called So Proudly We Hail. And it was about the nurses who served on Bataan and Corregidor during the fall of the Philippines. And that movie just impacted me. I always say it's very hard to say what impacted you when you were 10, but it impacted me so much that my sister, my older sister, gave it to me as a Christmas present on DVD about 20 years ago, because it was when I realized then that women also served. So I guess it was kind of a no-brainer that during the Vietnam War, I felt as I was graduating from nursing school, that I had an obligation and a duty, and I wanted to serve, which is why I volunteered. I literally left work one day, walked into the Army recruiter's office and said, I'm a nurse and I want to go to Vietnam. And they said, sign here. So that was what I did. And I think that, so I did initially was stationed at Letterman General Hospital, which was at the Presidio in San Francisco. And of course, it was a big hospital, was an old World War II type hospital. And it was a receiving hospital for all the casualties from Vietnam. So that was really my first exposure to the kind of patients that I would ultimately be caring for. I was there for about 4 or 5 months, and then I got my orders to go to Vietnam. And I went in January of 1969. I was 22 years old. And I was sent up to the 71st Evacuation Hospital in Pleiku in the Central Highlands. And upon my arrival there, they were very short-staffed, which one would come to find out was usually the case. And I was assigned to the intensive care unit. And back then, they usually only wanted you to work in the intensive care units for 6 months and then rotate out. Usually you had to be there 6 months before they put you in, but because they were so short-staffed and I had had some experience, I went right into the intensive care unit. And then at the end of 6 months, when they wanted me to rotate out, I said, no way, I'm leaving here. I am staying right here, because by that time I had pretty much dealt with everything that a war zone could send to you, and really felt that that was my obligation. Let me just say that, as everybody knows, you work long hours, you work 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, and you were on call other than that. And what I like to say is that I learned, I left Vietnam with a couple of lessons. When I first got there, I was totally overwhelmed by what I saw, what was expected of me, the demands that were being made on me. And what I realized was that at that very young age of 22, I had to find the resources within myself, just like all of us did, to deal with what I was confronted with and to fulfill my responsibilities. And I always said one of the most important lessons I learned in Vietnam was to learn that I can do this. I have the resources to do this, and I was able to do that. And that was one of the biggest positives that I left Vietnam with. I think the other thing was that to this day, and that was well over 50 years ago, I do consider that my service in Vietnam was the most important thing that I've ever done in my life. That there is absolutely nothing that can compare to being in a position where you can bring care and comfort, and on occasion even save a life for people who find themselves caught up in the catastrophe that is war, a lesson that apparently we once again are going to have to learn in the current environment that we're in. But like so many veterans, when I did return home, there were very few women. Over the 10 years of the Vietnam War, only 8,000 women served. So there weren't a lot of us to connect with each other. So coming home was definitely, as your introductory film showed, a very isolating, very confusing, very difficult time. Most people didn't even know that women were over there. They had no idea what you experienced. And everything that you encountered when you came home seemed less important than what you had done while you were over there. And it was a difficult time to make a transition. I remember my last few months in Vietnam, all I wanted to do was go home. And my first few months home, all I wanted to do was go back. And that laid the basis for the path that my life would take from there.
Beautiful, Joan. Thank you for sharing that. Just thinking 22 years old, right? And thinking about our fellow women veterans that serve and just the age range of service, and how on the younger phase of life several are as they transition from military service back into the civilian life. And that feeling of wanting to go home, right? As you stated, in Vietnam, wanting to go home, but then when you come home, wanting to go back because of that sense of isolation, because of that lack of connection, because of that divide between the military culture and the military experience and the civilian world. So thank you for laying that foundation for us, taking us back to the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. And I'm going to turn it over to Liz to trailblaze and tell us what it was like during the Cold War era.
Thanks, Qwynn, and thank you, Joan, for sharing that. So, when I joined, it was interesting because it was a recession, and things were it was post-Vietnam, and I had just applied for a new job and received it, and I had just graduated from high school, went to college for a year and quit because I already knew everything. So why stay in college? And I had taken this job and quit my other job, and my new employer called me and said, about that job, my best friend's daughter needs a job. So I gave it to her. And so here I was in 1977 when jobs were hard to come by and the price of gas was going up and everything. And I had a new car payment, and I didn't have a job, and I was looking for a job and couldn't find one. And my friend came to me and said, sort of out of the scene from Stripes, I have a great idea. Let's join the Army. And I said, that's a terrible idea. Let's not. And she said, no, it'll be fun. And I said, no, it will not. So she talked me into going to the recruiter's office, and it kind of sounded okay. And as it turned out, in the 70s, and I think even further, I don't know when they stopped it, but if you had a child, you couldn't join the military unless you gave them up for custody. You gave up complete custody. And my friend had 2 children, and she was not willing to give up custody of her children, understandably. So she said, I'm out. And I said, well, I don't have a job. I have car payment, and it's been weeks and a month. And so, okay, I'm in. So I went ahead and joined the Army, and I did quite well on my test. But at that time, there were about 300,000 or so service members. It was the Cold War in Germany, and they needed people in supply. And so they signed me up they said, yeah, you're really, you scored high on everything, but we really need people in supply. So how about that? And I said, okay, it sounds like something maybe I can put to use when I get out of the Army. So I went in, I went to quartermaster school. I will say they were just dismantling the WACs. And so I was in the second wave of women to go through Fort Jackson, South Carolina, co-ed. And they did not change anything. We did everything the men did. They didn't change the standards, the tests, anything. So we were actually in the same building. We were on the 3rd floor, and the men were on the 1st and 2nd floor. And they showed us the same hate they showed the men. When we got off the bus, there were 5 male drill sergeants, and they said, you little ladies need to know that there is no place in this man's army for girls. And we are going to spend the next 8 weeks showing you just how much we mean that. And if we have our way, not one of you will make it through. And so that was our introduction to this man's army, which they frequently called it. And so then I went to basic, while I was in Fort Jackson, I went to my drill sergeant and I said, drill sergeant, I want to be a ranger. And he said, Brooks, there are no girl rangers in this man's army. Get the hell out of my office. But he might have used some different curse words. And so I left. And when I went to AIT in Fort Lee, Virginia, I went to my sergeant and I said, Sergeant, I want to be a ranger. And he said, Brooks, there are no girl rangers in this man's army. Get the hell out of my office and don't ever come back with that nonsense. So I left and I approached again with the idea of being an 82nd Airborne, and it was the same thing. So I finished. It was a 12-week course. I finished in 6 weeks, and I went on to be a recruiter. They had this recruiter program, and I did that. And then I went to Germany, and I was the first woman in my company for it was, I think, like 6 months, and there were very few women on base, and they were not kind, and nobody on base was kind to women, and the Army didn't care, and so eventually more women came on base, but eventually I came to realize that it wasn't going to get better, and so I left. And when I was ready to re-enlist, the battalion recruitment officer was coming and saying, you're great, you've got all these accommodations, would you re-enlist? And I was watching the men were getting bonuses, and they were getting men who weren't performing to my level, and they were getting their choice, and they were able to change their MOSs, but they told me I couldn't get any of that because I was a girl. And so I said, the last time the battalion recruitment officer came to me, it was maybe a month before I was scheduled to leave. And I said, don't ever come back to me. I am not interested in re-enlisting in an army that so clearly is willing to discriminate me and hates me. So I'm leaving. Unless you can give me the same thing you've given the men, I am leaving. So I'm busy, don't come back. And so my sergeant came to me and said, you can't talk to the battalion recruitment officer that way. I said, then tell the battalion recruitment officer, because I got a month left, I have nothing left to lose. What are they going to do? Kick me out? So tell him not to come back, because I'm going to treat him the same way every time he comes back. So I left because I wasn't wanted and I didn't like the way they were treating me. And so interesting, I had a daughter. They tried to get me to leave when my daughter was born, but I knew that they couldn't because women were allowed to stay effective 1976. So they couldn't force me to leave. So I stayed. And when I left, we were wearing civilian clothes because they didn't have maternity uniforms. And so when I left, when I arrived in Fort Dix, New Jersey, they didn't know what to do with me. So I did not have a discharge process because they didn't have daycare. They didn't have a place for me to be with my child. So what they did was they sat me down. I had some injuries and stuff that I could have claimed, but they didn't know what to do with me. So their solution was they sat me down at a desk and they brought all the paperwork to me and they said, sign all of this paperwork and you'll be on a plane tomorrow. And so that was my discharge process. And they said, and by the way, since you're not getting medical, you can never apply for a service-connected disability, no matter that you've got these injuries that you sustained while you were in the military, because you're skipping medical. And so I left and I believed them when they said, you can never apply for service-connected disability. And so it wasn't until I was 40 and dating a man who was at an employment office who said, Liz, don't be dumb, they lied to you. That I finally applied for my service-connected disability. So I always tell people, they lied to you, apply for your service-connected disability.
Lesson learned, right?
Yeah.
So
that was my story of the service. And so one of the things that I always tell young women, if you're going to go, make sure that you have a mentor. Make sure you have someone, a woman who can guide you, who can help you while you're in the military, who can do all of those things for you. And here's my card. If you ever have any questions, call me.
Beautiful. A mentor. Beautiful. Keeping up with her story, right? And leading up to our post 9/11, hearing you talk about wanting to go to Ranger School, right? And thinking about the roles that women have now in service, where is your generation, they told you what you couldn't do. Look at where we are now because of trailblazers like you that stood on tables that made and paved those ways for us. The thought of hearing girl, right? Who to you? I was stationed at Fort Jackson too for basic training and AIT. So that's a familiar home. And I remember those days. I remember getting there and it wasn't a welcoming place for me as a woman. I remember that vividly. So thank you, Liz, for sharing what it was like for you and your experience and how you made meaning of your experience and your wisdom to not be silenced, right? Like that's huge. That's huge. Thank you. All right, Melissa. Melissa, I see you nodding over there. So I want to bring you into the fold and I want for you to share with us, bringing it up, how was your experience in service and how did you come to serve?
Well, while I'm talking, I'm going to actually try to join by my phone and hopefully the host will let that in as well. So just if you see two Melissa Bryants, hopefully that allows. Yeah, so let's see if that works here because it's easier for me to show you what inspires me to serve. And it's a part of what was in my my bio, and that is my my family. And it's making it easy from here. So I'm going to try it from my personal phone. I'm going to try some tricks here. So as I'm talking, if that doesn't work out, that's fine. I will pick up and use my computer. But the bottom line that I want to make sure that I, convey to you all is, as I'm listening to Joan, as I'm listening to Liz, so third generation combat veteran, you see some things behind me in my office, starting with the Buffalo Soldiers. And my grandfather served in the 9th Cavalry. He was killed in action in World War II in 1945. I can only imagine what it was like. My grandmother with a 9-month-old baby, my father, and my father who then went on to serve as a combat veteran in Vietnam, served for 27 years. And every other man in my family served. I was the first woman in my family to serve. Wow. And it was coming out of that family lineage, which is important also for Black folks. And I want to make sure I'm speaking from my personal experience, but recognizing that it comes from a lengthy history of the American service history. And that is that Black folks have served at every point in turn throughout all of our history, going back to the Revolutionary War. And that's often overlooked. And, I'm having difficulty coming off from my phone. And so I'm going to try to just turn it around here so you can see.
Yeah, take us on the tour, Melissa.
I've got family photos over here. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I turned around for folks to see is a picture of 6888 over there. And my father and my grandfather over here. And I don't know how well you can see all of that, but it's at the core of why I do what I do. It's at the core of why I serve here at the Department of Veterans Affairs and why I have always had service in my heart coming back from off of that military experience. So let me go back to how I got in. So all these men in my family, my grandmother who served, you knew all these men who always served in a family and said, well, what the hell are you doing? This man's army, that same type of speech is still there in the 90s. Because that's about when I came in, was in the 90s, pre 9/11. And I went into ROTC. That was the idea of my father and saying, you can go in through school and, they'll pay for school and it'll be just fine. No one had any concept of a 9/11 happening, right? Even though he had served in Vietnam, even though his father was killed in action in World War II, even though these things kind of happen in 50-year cycles. if not less. It was something where we just didn't have a concept of that. And his thought was, well, she'll go to law school and it'll be a great thing. And one, I can say that, the tradition of them selling you a bill of goods, whether it's ROTC or enlistment, still rings true, I think, for recruiters, officer or enlisted. And that was, I thought I'd go into the Army and I'd get to do great things as a lawyer. And, they don't really tell you that you'll spend probably the first 10 years of your career doing trial defense for the most menial of charges that soldiers get foisted upon them. And you're not really getting into sort of the operational side of things. And so I decided when I was in law school to go back to military intelligence, which was my branch coming out of Hampton University, which I also want to give a shout out to HBCUs and ROTC programs, which again have continued along that long-standing tradition of military service in the Black community, because it's always been a pathway for us moving into the middle class. And that was a big push, right? It was a big impetus for my family and that continuation of service to see that we were able to get our education, to be able to become professionals, to provide, for our families, and also, frankly, to have benefits. As I'm hearing Liz talking about, I had car payment, I had kid, I had this and I had that, and at the heart of it is also about, the service connected benefits that she was initially denied. That's something that's familiar to us as well. It's certainly something that the department is still reconciling with, of the benefits that were denied to Black veterans, to women veterans, to Black women veterans, and in recognizing that, but it at least was better than nothing. And that's kind of the thought process, even as I was still joining ROTC, even after I was commissioned, even after then the unthinkable happened on 9/11, and that completely flipped on its ear. What does service look like? And 20 years later, we're here looking back at what services look like over the last 20 years and how much we've evolved as a post 9/11 force. So seeing multiple combat tours, unlike we'd seen since Vietnam, seeing the evolution and acceptance of women, being able to, become a Ranger, become a Green Beret, all those things that, I worked in SOF as an intel person, not as a Green Beret, wasn't something available to me, just it wasn't available for Liz. But in seeing those changes in combat arms, you still saw many of the injustices that women particularly face. And then especially when you start adding in LGBTQ, and you started seeing that shift happening around the time when I was on active duty, particularly from 2005 all the way through 2010 into the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And so when I reflect upon my why is my family, my why is the legacy, the things I keep on my wall here, and the things that remind me of from where we came to where we're going. I also try to reflect on how far we've come to. And I try to reflect on some of the things that I know color a lot of our service today. And I think this will probably serve as a good segue into some of our other conversations. As a Black woman, I found myself being the only in every room. I still do. Let's be real. I still do. But certainly when I was on active duty, certainly was the only Black woman military intelligence officer stationed in Hawaii, stationed in Baghdad, take your pick from coast to coast. I was the only one. I still get, you speak so well. You're so well spoken. Freaking DAS for public affairs. Of course I know how to talk, but that's me being real, and being honest about us recognizing our strengths, our power, and what we bring to the table. But some of the more humbling experiences were also when you spoke to people about their experiences, and juxtaposed by that struggle, I'd also say was probably one of the more memorable experiences that I had was when we still had Chapter 15 as a part of the manual courts martial. And that was the administrative separation of LGBTQ. And I had a soldier who came to me once who voluntarily said that he wanted to separate under Chapter 15. Me as a company commander sit there and said, hey, listen, I get it's hard. I can't imagine how hard it is for you. I'm thinking of how hard it is just for me. to exist here in this man's army, this white man's army sometimes. But this conversation didn't happen. You can go out that door. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. This conversation didn't happen. And he said to me, "Ma'am, I'm tired. I'm just tired. I'm tired of not living as me." So I mention that now because I know we're going to talk about the evolution of service, and that for me crystallized in that moment how far we still had to come. That was circa 2005 when that happened, and how far we have already gone at this point to point to where that feels like it's in the rearview mirror. But those experiences, those unique experiences, even though we move beyond that place in history, you see the thread, you see the common theme. And so when Joan talks about being one of the onlys, only 8,000 women to serve in Vietnam, when Liz talks about being one of the onlys and not having a proper family care plan to the point of giving up full custody of your kids and not having maternity wear and not having a discharge plan. And then for me, in my experience, even though it's further along, and we've accepted Black men and we've accepted women, there's still a little bit of tinge there of Black women that I certainly felt coming in and finding my own voice. And I saw even throughout my own experience as a Black woman Army officer, what was to come when that soldier came into my office. And now I'm glad to sit here at the Department of Veterans Affairs to see how far we've gone so that we are providing those benefits, even for that soldier who walked into my office. We are serving all who served. That person will not be denied their benefits because they probably got a wrongful, other than honorable discharge. But it just goes to show how far we have to continue to go along the timeline to see what's to come.
Yeah. Beautiful, Melissa. And that's the point of this conversation, right? Is being able to see how far we have come and the strides that we still need to take to get to where we know our future generation has better supports, better understanding, better acceptance, not feeling invisible the way so many of us have felt in the past. Thank you. Thank you. And from one HBCU alum to another, right? Like, I didn't even think about that. That's where I was recruited. I was recruited while I was in college. And you're 100% right. I cannot count how many times I walk into a room or walk into a meeting and I'm told the same thing, and forget when I'm acknowledged as Dr. Galloway-Salazar. It's another added layer on there as a Black woman veteran who has a PhD, but we're continuing to blaze those trails. And for us who are sitting at this table, allowing young girls, young women that are looking at us and saying, wow, we can too. We can too. So thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to circle back around to you. So don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. Bringing us home in this introductory question is Layla. Layla, can you join us?
Hello, yes, I'm with y'all.
Hi, Layla.
Hi, Qwynn. You know, I am so listening to Joan and Liz and even incredibly Melissa, all your stories. I feel like I am sitting on the shoulders of giants right now. And I each story that goes, I still have goosebumps. I don't know if you can see it on the screen. I have goosebumps because it's a testament to how far we have come. Just like Melissa had mentioned, we have to acknowledge how far we've come and how much more we have to go, right? For me, I come from a long legacy of folks in the military in my family that have served. My father, my grandfather, my great grandfather, and as an openly transgender woman. When I joined the military, I was a male, and I wanted to be part of that legacy. I wanted to be part of that tradition. The only problem was that I had to choose between being myself, my authentic self, and choose to serve. And obviously at that time, especially with Don't Ask, Don't Tell being implemented, and there was no no rules or regulations governing transgender service. It basically was, it was chosen for me. And I even remember enlisting into the military and looking at that paper, the contract, and seeing that question, are you homosexual, or have you had any homosexual activity? I remember seeing that question on my enlistment paperwork, and just thinking about it, going back, that's crazy, right? But when we're talking about women's history, as a trans woman in the military, I'm hearing each story through Joan's. I'm hearing key points in each story through Joan, through Liz, and through Melissa. There are a lot of things that I resonate with, and a lot of trans women in the military resonate. And trans women, the space for trans women was just created recently in the military, right? And so when Joan mentions LGBT, equity in the military, it's a real thing. It's still happening, and we're still combating that today, on top of the other things that we've all talked about today. So it's really tough. The reason why I served, other than my family wanting to be part of that tradition, and why I continue to serve even after, wanting to become myself, was because I knew that there was a greater purpose for me, not just to my country, but to my people. And so when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, I remember I was stationed in San Antonio, and I remember seeing the streets of San Antonio filled with every service member that was LGBT you could possibly think of. It was amazing to watch service members in uniform, not in uniform. They were coming out in droves, and it was a celebratory moment, men and women alike. But in that moment, you still understood that women were not seen as equal, right? Trans people were not seen as equal. And so that is what prompted me in my transition, in my advocacy, in the work that I do today, to jump into this movement of, we need to be recognized as well. Because for years, for generations, women like me have served in the military. So I want to go back really quickly to Albert Cashier. And I'm not sure if any of you have heard who Albert DJ Cashier is. During the American Civil War, there was a woman who wanted to fight alongside her male counterparts in the military. And because she was a woman, she could not. And so she pretended to be a male, and she went through the military and enlisted and did all those things, and was acknowledged as a male. Only until she was injured was she able to be discovered as a female. What surprised me coming out of that story was that Albert Cashier, the comrades that she had fought with, acknowledged her service because of what she did. And I think that resonates with a lot of us. Our service is finally being recognized through every generation you can think of. And that's the reason why I said I started off with, I feel like I'm sitting on the shoulders of giants today with Liz and Joan and Melissa, because you all have paved that way for women like me, to be able to have that hope, to be able to have that fire, that determination, that motivation to keep pushing forward, being the only in the room. When I started transitioning, I was the only open trans woman that decided to share her story and make it a national topic, which prompted both my husband and I to share our story collectively. And it pushed legislation, it pushed our government to really see and acknowledge and respect us as service members who have volunteered and sacrificed their lives, their time, their families to serve and protect this country. And so I know my portion is just short, but I definitely want to say thank you to each and every one of you that sit on this panel, because being able to be in this space with you, I still have goosebumps. Being able to be in this space with you is such an honor, because women like me have not had the opportunity to sit at the table with you all. And it is incredible to see how far we have come. But it also is very heartwarming to know that fighting along each of you for our future is important, because we have such a rich history as women that needs to be told in the future by our future, and we're going to be a part of that. So thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this panel today.
Goosebumps, Layla. That's right. Like, I'm trying to keep the tears in the back of my eyes, because I'm looking at the responses in the chat. Goosebumps. I think that's going to be hashtag goosebumps from this conversation at the table, in hearing everyone share and feeling that sense that for years a common thread were that we were not seen as equal, right? But furthermore, so here's what I find absolutely amazing with all four of you women. And thank you all for your vulnerability in sharing. We can read your bios all day. We can Google you all day. But I can promise you, every attendee that's in this virtual audience sees your heart and sees your why, as Melissa stated. What's your why? We see your why. Each one of you transitioned from service into civilian life and made the decision to keep on serving, right? It's apparent to me that service just doesn't stop for some of us because we separate from the military. It's embedded in our DNA. It's I like to say, it's who we be. It's who we are. It's ingrained in us. And for so many of us who had obstacles and challenges and barriers to jump over, we made the decision to say, we're not going to be silenced, and we're going to use our voices, and we're going to amplify this cause to ensure that our future generations aren't invisible. So once again, I thank you all for sharing your journey. But I want to go into a few questions with you all and kind of bring us to where we are today. And I'm gonna go to Liz. So Liz, in having the opportunity to see where the center has come from. So starting with Joan, knowing that Joan was one of the founding members of the Center for Women Veterans, and seeing the work that she did to amplify supportive services and healthcare services for women veterans that served in Vietnam, for ensuring that PTSD programs were created that were developed for men, but also having a track developed to specifically focus on the needs of our women. Can you share a little bit, Liz, where we are now? I know there's a huge campaign. I think we all have seen it on social media. If we're walking through the VAs, we see the I am not invisible. It was 2.0, 3.0, we're at like 3.0 at this point. Can you tell the audience what that campaign is and what it aims to do?
Sure. So thank you. Yes. So that I Am Not Invisible started as just a project, and it was just, the idea was just to help make women veterans more visible, because everybody knows that women veterans are invisible. And so the idea was just like, let's make these posters that say I am not invisible, so that people can see us. It was sort of a clapback, like, I am not invisible, see me. And then it became a campaign. It became me dragging them around the state of Oregon. In about 2 years, I took them to 60 different venues. They were in museums. They were in 5 different states. I brought them here to DC, and the Center for Women Veterans brought them on. And it changed the exhibit, the campaign, because it breathed a bigger life into it. There are now 3,000 pictures, which that's what that's what made 2.0 and put them into hospitals, et cetera, because the campaign is what took it from the posters to raising awareness about women veterans and their particular needs and experiences, so that so that, because what I always, when I came to the 25th anniversary and spoke about it, I said, these, as a campaign, this is a tool that can be used to help people visually immediately see women, but furthermore, a tool to help people, I'm sorry, it's this air, understand and really ingest what it is that women are feeling, and become aware of that, the reality of women veterans, and also for women veterans to become more aware of what's available to them. You know, we use it to help women veterans connect with their benefits and services, to help women veterans. Until you've stood in front of those images, you can't really gather the full power that comes with the I Am Not Invisible project. Because to see women veterans stand in front of that and feel the power of that, to talk to the women veterans who've participated, to see people who don't think they need to look at it and then stand in front of it and suddenly get it, that they're looking at women veterans differently, and hear them say, you know, a year ago I saw an I Am Not Invisible poster, and I've never forgotten since then that women veterans serve. And that's what that campaign is about. And now it hangs in the secretary's hallway, which from what I understand is a big deal. That's never happened. We're getting ready to install it at Dulles Airport. 35 million people a year go through Dulles Airport. That is a phenomenal event by itself, because more people who aren't veterans will be able to stop and see that and feel that, and it'll have a QR code back to the Center for Women Veterans page, so that people can connect with the Center for Women Veterans and VA benefits and services and what we offer. And that's why it's a campaign. It's branded, and it's helping people understand and raise awareness of women as veterans. And that's what it's about.
That's awesome. I'm looking through the chat and I see some of the women veterans who have been photographed. So please, if you have been photographed, share it. Heck, if you're in the chat and you're able to upload the picture of your photo, share it. The more that we know about that experience, the better we are, right? And thinking about just standing in that space. And I've had the opportunity to look at several of the photos. And recently, I know there's an event on March 8th. And Liz, I want you to share a little bit about what's happening on March 8th. And, you know, I looked at your photo and I saw the tattoo on your arm that said she thought she could, so she did. And I was just like, heck yeah, let's shoot that from the rooftop. She thought she could, and so she did it, right? Mm-hmm. And that there's so much power in that. And when we see photos of yourself, and we see photos of other women who look like us, and those who don't necessarily look like us, it allows us to feel that sense of belonging, that sense that we are a part of something greater, that we're not alone, that there's this connection, this human innate connection to our collective experience. And so with that, and with the goal of having women veterans feel like they belong within the arms of the VA, in the arms of their community, I do want to transition a little bit, and this is an open question to all of you. We know the numbers of women veterans that are dying by suicide are staggering. We're seeing those numbers climb. What, you know, thinking about the sense of belonging and thinking about connectedness as suicide prevention strategies, what can we all do to help bring a level of awareness about this issue that we're facing with women veterans that are dying by suicide?
Trying to come off mute fast enough because I was typing here in the chat about I Am Not Invisible, which I highly encourage everyone. Coordinate with Liz or, you know, me, or let me know, like, get your picture taken, feel it, feel your power. What can we do about women in prevention of suicide? Well, one, One of the things that the department has done, that's a bit of a change from our previous suicide prevention efforts, has been to recognize the lethality of firearms and to recognize that women veterans die by suicide at a rate 2.5 times higher than that of our civilian counterparts. And the reason why is because of our access and familiarity with firearms. The numbers have gone down overall for suicide rate. However, for the number of suicides. The rate for post 9/11 is still high. The rate for women is still high. And part of that is because of a lot of what we see of the pressures that we are still facing as modern women today. And so what can we do about that? Well, we can support a lot of the social programs, frankly, that support all of us as a community. You know, Liz is talking about childcare, in the 80s and early 80s, and that's something that we still struggle with now. We need to ensure that one of the things that we've worked on for a long time, myself, when I was on this side of advocacy and working to build legislation, now on the other side, on working as an appointee at VA and implementing legislation, is to ensure that we are providing places for women to be able to have their children when they come to appointments. We are not having as many, barriers to receiving your care, receiving your benefits. Bringing down those walls reduces the stressors such as financial stress, loss, which is always going to come from some type of loss of time on the job, time that you can devote to other things besides childcare. Those things all roll downhill, so to speak. And that can contribute to a compounding state of woe and despair. And women, we're so strong. We are so strong that we just take it all in. I call myself, with my therapist, everyone should have a therapist, it's 2022. No shame.
No shame.
No shame. I tell my therapist, I've been telling her for years, I feel like a trash compactor. Just push it all down. Just keep pushing it all down. So you just fit more in, and so that you can just keep it moving. And that's, on the one hand, our strength. On the other hand, it is our Achilles heel. It is our fatal flaw. It is something that you need to be able to, at some point, relieve that pressure, release that valve, so that you can be able to acknowledge your vulnerabilities, acknowledge where you need to seek help, and then actually seek said help, so that we can move beyond that trash compactor mentality. Because what happens with that trash compactor mentality mixed with the access, familiarity, and lethality of firearms is a recipe for disaster for women veterans.
I just wanted to jump in here and talk about this campaign about the invisible veteran. A friend of mine, in fact, you may know, some of you may know her. She was a former deputy or the assistant secretary for policy and planning at VA during the Obama administration, and commissioner of Veterans Affairs for Connecticut, Linda Schwartz. And Linda started a campaign through the American Academy of Nursing, but in trying to get it out, it's not just for women, it's for veterans, but I think it's specific for veterans. It's called Have You Ever Served? And basically what that is based in is really for healthcare providers, not just in the VA, because one of the things we are so aware of is the vast majority of veterans do not get their care from VA. They do not encounter VA clinicians, VA practitioners. So there is a level where there's maybe a level of sensitivity, one would hope, to the experience that the individual may have. So the idea behind Have You Ever Served is to get this information out to healthcare professionals in the general practice, outside in the community. Let them know about, to find out, are there patients, veterans? What were their experiences like while they were in military? What was remember way back when I first started working in post-traumatic stress disorder, where one of the things we wanted to do, and this was in the VA, was they always talked about having doing a military history. Well, in 1970 and the late 70s, when you did a military history, it said, well, you're in the military, what branch? Nobody asked where you were, what you did, what you were exposed to, whether it was a combat situation, environmental hazard, sexual or physical assault of any kind, none of that. Just, that's not a military history. We started to get questions on the form that said, were you ever exposed, were you in combat? Were you exposed to combat casualty care? Because I know as a nurse and someone who's dealt with the issues of PTSD, both personally and with many other veterans, is people never, or number one, they didn't think you could possibly have PTSD if you were a woman. Certainly if you were not in, quote, combat, meaning carry a gun, so certainly as Vietnam veterans, as women, we didn't at the time think of ourselves as, quote, combat veterans. It didn't matter that we were bombed and rocketed and we were taking care of patients while our hospitals were under attack. That wasn't combat, duh. That was really the message that was sent to us. So why should you be experiencing any of these stresses? I had an experience when I was at the center working with benefits, where we were dealing with these issues of sexual assault, where a person, an individual who was responsible for providing a rating to an individual, actually, even though this was a case where a sexual assault was documented, because this particular individual did not think sexual assault was a stressful or traumatic event, denied the claim. I mean, those things are like hard to believe,
Right.
and unbelievable, but those things happen. So when you begin to realize that the encounters veterans have with the public go beyond the VA, and that if you can get into your community health centers, your general practitioners, your more routine community clinics, and you can sensitize people to doing some basic screening questions, you can then make a more appropriate assessment and referral for care intervention.
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing up the work of Dr. Linda Swartz. Have had the opportunity. I see some familiar names that have been a part of the Governor's Challenge to Prevent Suicide among service members, veterans, and their families in the chat. And one of the things that's talked about is asking the question, have you or a loved one served, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's also taking into consideration that if a loved one of yours has served and you're serving in the capacity of a caregiver, right? And sometimes you're a caregiver, but you're also someone who has also served. Let's do our part in ensuring that there are safety plans and safety mechanisms that are supportive of you. So absolutely, definitely spread the word on, asking the question, have you or a loved one served? Thank you, Joan, for bringing that to our attention. Looking at the time, and I can sit here and say, ladies, we can do this all night. We can bring in coffee. We can do it Golden Girls style and bring in the cheesecake with it. But I just want to make sure that we're covering two more topics before I turn it back over to Kelly. One, I want to share this quick piece of my story. And when I came home in 2006, and I was searching for a job. Here I was, fresh off of active duty. I think I was 22, Joan, as well. I was 22 when I got off of active duty. And I was looking for a job. I served as a finance specialist in the Army, and I also served in Postal. So it's very fitting that the 6888 was honored. And I can feel that because I understood that. And I came home and I had the opportunity to interview for a civilian employer. And here's what happened, y'all. I'm from Georgia, so, well, I live in Georgia, so y'all has now become a part of my vernacular. I sat at a table with a interview panel, and I handed them my resume and the work that I did while I served. Remember, I was only 22, so the only experience I had was service. And they did not understand anything that I brought to the table. The soft skills, the hard skills, they didn't understand it. And quite honestly, I didn't understand how to explain to them what I was bringing to their organization. So similar to you all, my story led me into this world of how can I make a difference in women veterans transitioning from the military into the civilian workforce. So I want to shed some light there and talk about that, because right now we talked about the suicide piece, but we're also seeing the unemployment rate being a high one for our women veterans. So I would love for you all, once again, open question, jump in how you feel fit. What advice do you have for considerations for employing women veterans? And on the flip side of that, what is some advice that you would want to give your fellow women veterans as they're transitioning from the military into the civilian workforce? And are there any lessons learned that you would love to share?
I'm just going to jump in really quick to say, Melissa or Liz, if you want to jump in on that, feel free, but I do know you have to run to another meeting. So we are so grateful for your attendance with us today, but we acknowledge that you're going to have to depart, but feel free to jump in that question if you can.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you. I'll go ahead. One of the things that I think is really important for me, and I know you know, Qwynn, that we're working on a study. For me, I think one of the important things for women veterans is to make sure that you're taking care of yourself when you're seeking employment, and find mentors. That's something I think that women veterans, find support systems. We know that when men get out of the military, they tend to have those support systems, and women don't do that at the same rates as men. And that's having those support systems at, whether it's a local group of women with veterans that you meet for coffee, or whether it's a group of women veterans at your workplace, however that looks. I think that support system is so important for women veterans, who, especially those whether you're transitioning out now or whether you've transitioned out a year or 5 years or 10 years ago. I didn't see myself a veteran or connect as a veteran for decades. And when I started connecting with women veterans, I'll tell you, it changed my life. So whether it's been 5 years or 20 years or 30 years, make those connections. It will make a difference for you, and especially if you're looking for work.
Yeah,
I have to go. Thank you, everyone, so much.
Liz, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sitting at our table. Thank you for your service, and we honor you this month and every month. Thank you.
Same to everyone. Bye.
Melissa, I know that you also have to jump off too. Did you want to jump in on there and give your final thought about the unemployment and what we can do to support women as they transition to the civilian workforce?
Yes. Very quickly, I'll say, I know that there's some generic advice that's not just for women, and that is, as military in general, you've got to be able to, as you spoke to, Qwynn, speak to the transferability, the portability of your skills. You have tons of soft skills. Look up all those action verbs that are out there for military and just use those and move it over to your resume. Directed, managed, supervised, those are your management words. And then you have, in some shape or form, if you were a private in charge of a fire team and you led them in silent prayer, then you did something in terms of management, logistics, team building, you know, some of the softer skills of being able to show that you are able to encourage others and really build organizations, you know. So I say pick up those organizational books. They seem cheesy, but they work. And being able to translate your skill sets. As women in particular, we are terrible at selling ourselves. Terrible. Women veterans, again, this goes back to our strength is our weakness. Our greatest strength is our strength, and that we're so strong that we take ourselves for granted. We take our skills for granted. We take our mental acuity for granted. We take that mental toughness for granted. Take it all in, channel it, and push it back out on a resume and bring it into that interview and get that interview, and then really let yourself shine. But recognize your strength, recognize your power, recognize where you came from, who you came from, what you came from, and bring it all in to the table when you sit at that interview. And then just that's your time. And then always remember to ask them, like, so what do I get out of this? Because remember, interviews are two-way streets. You're interviewing them too. And so for everything we're talking about that you didn't like in the military, find out about an organization of, well, why should I choose you? Because you're choosing me because of my skills and my strengths and my abilities that are from a long history of women and of people of color and of people of all different backgrounds, LGBTQ, who have brought us to where we are here. We have fought for the rights of all, regardless of whether they fought for the rights of me. And that's something to remember as you sit in your power, as you sit in your strength, and as you try to make sure that you are going to the right organization that will respect you and everything that you bring to the table. Lastly, negotiate your pay. That's all I'll have to say about that. Get paid for what you do. Women, we need to do it. So those are my thoughts on how to find a job, how to find one that is worthy of you. And just always remember your worth, whether it's from the actual coins to what you need in order to have the mental health and peace of mind in order to look yourself in the mirror and wake up and do that work day in and day out. Everything that you did in the military brought you to where you are now. And you are part of a long, rich, valuable history. And you're continuing to make her story as you continue on your journey.
I'd like to make a comment if I could about that, because I think that this is all really important what Melissa is saying. I think, but Liz made the point about other women veterans, but I would also like to talk about the fact that a lot of the young women coming out of the military, I do some work with the community college, you know, and they have veterans organizations, and a lot of these young women, they don't have this experience of self that perhaps some of us sitting here on this panel do. And they really need assistance in developing those skills to learn how to own the talents or the things that they have learned and that they do have. And I really think it's imperative that all the new advocacy groups, you know, when I was coming up, there were no advocacy group for women veterans. Nobody ever talked about it. Is to reach out not just to the women veterans who join the groups, because they tend to be smaller than the women veterans who are out in the community, but to reach out to these student veterans organizations at the community colleges and at the universities and at that level, and really encourage these organizations to work with these students on learning how to translate what they did in the military into the kind of language that they can present in a civilian environment so that people can appreciate what they've done. I mean, I've always said to people, you know, you come out of the military, you've done more, you've been in charge of more things, you've been given more responsibility at a younger age than most other young people have. So you just have to learn to translate that. And that's where the issue is with the unemployment to employment. It may also be where the issue is from the mental health issues of dealing with, we're talking about high rates of suicide in this population. their ability to begin to identify and reach out and ask for the assistance and help that they need, and not to be ashamed and embarrassed about that. And you have to get to the people who aren't on this call.
Yeah.
So the people on this call are the ones who have to get to that population.
Yes. And Layla, I'm going to ask you to jump in because it goes back to this term you use. It's the ripple effect, right?
It is.
Home that piece about the ripple effect and tie it all together, about the employment and just the experience of transgender and LGBTQ plus and just the diversity and the equity and inclusion and accessibility in the workplace for women, for veterans. That would be amazing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The ripple effect that I talked about yesterday briefly, all of what the panelists today talked about is truly important. And Joan really hit it on the head, on the nail, with, understanding self, right? And so when we understand self, that's just that pebble that we're dropping into that calm water, and it sends that ripple effect on everything. It changes everything. It affects everything. And so, you have to we have to break the stigma of going and seeking help, right? Asking for help is not a bad thing. Having a therapist, I have a therapist, like Melissa had mentioned. I have a therapist. I talk about everything, and it's okay. It is not a bad thing. I think in years before, seeking mental health assistance probably was looked down upon, but now it's truly important in order for us to be able to keep on fighting, keep on moving forward. So, listen to these wonderful women talk today was super amazing because they really hit every point possible. And not just in this conversation, but I hope that everyone listening, that everyone that's tuning in is going to take these seeds and plant it out there in our communities, because it's important when we share that information, when we connect with each other, when we connect with our community, and we're actually doing that work, we're making it better for everyone moving forward. Really quick on my end, I think, aside from understanding self, is really knowing that you are worth it. Just plain and simple, you are worth it. You're worth whatever you think you can do. And if you put your mind to it, that's what you can do. And a lot of women in my time, a lot of leaders, a lot of other women veterans, a lot of veterans have helped me shape my womanhood into what it is today, because they have taught me that. And that's the most valuable lesson that I've learned and that I'm going to take with me moving forward. And I hope that I can pass that on to each of you as well. So thank you so much.
So as the young people say, that's when you drop the mic.
Right? Yeah, mic drop.
Drop the mic. And I'm going to tie it up and I'm going to turn it over to Kelly in a second. But I want to close it out with a story that Joan shared with me 2 weeks ago. So Joan had the privilege and the honor to recognize a World War II woman veteran, and her family was there. And just thought of a woman veteran from Vietnam acknowledging a woman veteran from World War II.
On the occasion of her 100th birthday.
On her 100th birthday. And having her family be able to see that and take part and to know that she's a part of history and that's her legacy. That's what we're all doing. And that's what it's all about. Because guess what? That will be all of us at some point. And to do a good job at that, we have got to continue being willing to tell our stories, get uncomfortable with the uncomfortable, because in order for our society to see us, they have to hear us. We will be, hopefully, 100 one day and have the opportunity to be awarded or to be honored for what we have done in our life to make our country, to make the citizens of our country free. So I challenge you all, everyone that's still on this call, you know someone that served, you know a her or someone that has served. Be willing just to ask a few questions, right? Let her have the opportunity to tell a part of her story or all of her story. and know that there's so much healing in telling one story. Because as Melissa said, there's so much that we just push down. And sometimes all it takes is just to have an active listening ear, to listen in and hear us, and to allow us to feel that our stories matter too. So I thank you all for joining us at this virtual dining room / kitchen table as we spoke the tea of our multi-generational women veterans. I cannot thank the audience enough. Yes, I see the comments that have been flooding in. I know Kelly is going to touch on the questions, and I know Kelly is going to bring us all home. So with that, once again, thank you all for all of you that have served, that are on this call. Thank you for your service, and we honor you.
Thank
Kelly,
you so much, Dr. Galloway-Salazar. We honor you and recognize your amazing and incredible skills. Can you imagine if these stories were not recorded and if we didn't capture this in history? There is a way for each and every one of us as women veterans through the Military Women's Service Memorial to record her story. So I encourage each and every one of you to get involved, record your story of your friends and families. It is critical that we capture these experiences and record them today. Stories matter, personal experiences matter, connection matters. And we have so many great organizations out there to help get women jobs, connection, and connect to each other. That's what Combined Arms is in the business of doing. Foundation for Women Warriors is going to be screening Unsung Heroes tomorrow night. Go to their website and find that. Minority Veterans of America has chapters across the nation to get you connected. Of course, Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, they need your help right now as they are working on comprehensive toxic exposure legislation. Contact your representatives. It does take an act of Congress sometimes. There are directions on their website about how you can get involved, but this is how we expand critical health care for women. We are just so grateful to them for their leadership in that area. And of course, to the Mission Continues, there's ways to get involved with their service platoons that are open now. Applications are due March 20th. And then this summer, they'll be opening up applications for their Women Veterans Leadership Corps. As many others have shared, great organizations in the chat, Woven, Grace After Fire, all of these great women veterans serving organizations. There are organizations out there, and as our so wise Joan shared with us, just connect into your community. That's exactly where things are happening. And there are women veterans out there that can serve as mentors, and you can serve others as their mentor. So again, happy Women's History Month to all of you. Thank you to each and every one of you for joining us. Qwynn, Layla, Joan, Melissa, Liz, we are so grateful to you for sharing your time and experiences with us today. We wish you the best as you enjoy the rest and celebrate the rest of this month, and we honor you today. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.